Interoperability at Valere, there's not a UI that you go into at Valere. It's a utility that sits underneath, takes an event that comes out of one of those systems and creates a workflow and delivers it to wherever people are working in the next. And it doesn't require people to do that.
You run the DME and now you're continuing to build technology for it. What's one of the biggest inefficiencies you saw that needed fixing?
We've created here at Valere something we call cast. First thing you have to do is clean up and make information good. If you perpetuate bad information, it just snowballs from there.
If you were to look ahead 3 to 5, maybe even 10 years, what does like a modern DME operation look like to you?
I think it's going to be a hell of a lot simpler, quite honestly. I think that the chaos in our industry comes from too many experiences. And what is happening here is a standardization of the process. You're going to be able to scale much quicker. There's the human element. It can never go away in healthcare. We're seeing AI agents FaceTime with patients. I'm not saying that technology isn't going to still do it, but at some point, a one-on-one, side-by-side relationship with the patient is still going to be there.
We are live on the Claim to Fame podcast, the #1 DME podcast in the country. And today we have a very special guest, Dewey from Valer Health. Welcome to the show, Dewey.
Hey guys, glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Welcome.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Well, Dewey, usually the way we get started is give you a chance to tell everyone that's listening a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your company for those who don't know who Dewey is.
All right. So if we back up several years ago, I sold an HME company. So I've been in this business for almost 30 years now. Started in sales, worked my way up through operations, got into some leadership, ultimately to a partnership, and ultimately owned Life HME all by myself for about 10 years and exited with Adapt Health back in 2021. And along the way, learned a lot of things, top to bottom of the organization, what it took to run this crazy type of business. And so about 2017, 2016, we started developing some of our own software to help us make sense of all this chaos. Well, that software and that effort never got monetized inside our own walls. So when I sold the HME company, there was this staff sitting on the outside to say, what do we do with this thing? We had a couple of customers with it and said, okay, let's get serious about a bigger problem. And so what we were trying to do is develop a singular piece of software and help with this chaos collection of information on the front side, create clean orders all the way through. And then on the back side, we were bolting on what we called Life Touch. And that was an outcomes management program. So we were trying to tell the whole story and then go to HMEs and say, here it is, why don't you buy into this? Well, that wasn't a very good strategy. So I bumped into, or had the pleasure of meeting, who is today our Chief Technology Officer, a guy named Doug Thornton. And he said, Dewey, I really like what you're trying to do. Can we talk about a different way of doing it? And he introduced me to a different technology architecture called data event streaming. And ultimately, instead of us trying to do all that activity for an HME, we were going to now give them a tool to enable them to do all those things. And so that is how Valer Health was born. And we kicked off in 2022. We stumbled around a little bit with our messaging. And then I think we've finally gotten that right after a couple of years. We've had a couple of squirrels along the way, but we're in a good spot right now at Valer Health. But the way you think about Valer Health is as a utility. Think of us as a central nervous system that you attach to that takes in information, processes it, and then deploys action from it. We're not actually a software that's doing a specific task necessarily, although we have some tools to do those things. So does everyone else. That's not why we exist. We exist to solve the problems for HMEs, which is really all of this fragmented, disconnected systems of what it takes for you to run your organization front to back. So there's a long-winded intro to Valer Health and how we got here.
That's super interesting, Dewey. Thank you. And, of course, you've run the DME and now you're continuing to build technology for it. What's one of the biggest inefficiencies you saw that needed fixing?
Well, we've created here at Valere something we call CAST. And so for me, it's the idea that you first with the CAST, first thing you have to do is clean up and make information good. Because if you perpetuate bad information, it just snowballs from there, right? So I saw the biggest, obviously we have disconnection, but we have incomplete data. We have complementary data that needs to come into a folder or to a patient's story. And so to me, it's really about establishing a good starting point. Regardless of what you're doing in your operation, it all starts with clean, complete, compliant data. And from that point forward, you can be successful. I think the frustrating thing for me as an HME owner is you're almost presumed guilty until proven innocent, right? You have this body, these compliance bodies, these audit bodies coming after your money, and nothing intentional usually happens. We have some bad actors in our space, no doubt, but by and large, the overwhelming majority of people are just trying to do good things for people. And something was not there in a file necessarily that created bad revenue from you is a very heavy penalty. And so I think leveraging technology to make sure that things are clean on the front end and that you're protected downstream, before you do anything else, you have to clean up your data.
Dewey, there's obviously, inefficiencies in the way that a lot of people run their businesses, and it's probably common in this space as well. What were you seeing as kind of common manual processes that are happening today that shouldn't be happening?
As you're talking, I'm imagining back in my old office looking across, 40 some odd people sitting in a room on phones and, sitting here looking up at ceilings, waiting on an authorization, waiting on eligibility, or, picking this information from this screen and literally going to the next screen to enter it. So, the entire process is fraught with manual activity that is completely unnecessary. So the layup, the easy one is the intake process. I got a fax that's coming over still, somehow, some way that still exists. And now I've got to begin to create a file to create the order information. But first you got to start with the patient. All those are unnecessary steps in today's world. So it doesn't matter. It's everywhere else is the short answer. It's what's interesting to me is we have organizations that we're working with that some are just talking about fax only. That's the one that everyone's really kind of focused on. But the next person says, no, we got that down to a T. It may be prior authorizations. It may be QA/QC. Where's your bottleneck? And although there are prevalent ones, they're not all the same. It's company by company.
Dewey, you talk a lot about interoperability. What does that actually mean in real life for a DME company?
Having all your systems work together for a common good. And so there are so many great products on the market that do what they do extremely well. But they don't, there are APIs established. Obviously, some people are more open than others. Obviously, Nico is gaining a lot of traction because of how open and easy it is to work with you, which is fantastic. More people need to think that way, but not everyone's built that way. Mm-hmm. But every company has a different set of assets, technological assets they pulled into their workflow, and they move information to and from these different systems all day, every day. But that isn't necessarily the same way it's done somewhere else. So interoperability at Valere, again, we talked about being a utility. There's not a UI that you go into with Valere. It's a utility that sits underneath, takes an event that comes out of one of those systems and creates a workflow and delivers it to wherever people are working in the next. And it doesn't require people to do that. So interoperability is simply the ability to pull together all your technology stack, and make it work seamlessly together.
Yeah, and actually, one of my questions here is kind of what is the main problem you're solving, but I think you just answered it if I'm not mistaken.
We think so.
Yep.
So you didn't ask me this, but I'm going to give it to you. When I looked at my organization, we were able to increase our profitability by the same technique that I just talked about. But today we're just leveraging technology. We cleaned things up. We took people from behind the order, put them on front of the order, and made sure that what went into the system was clean. Nothing went into our system that wasn't clean. It didn't meet the requirements. Okay, so we put all that effort up there, and there's a tremendous amount of effort with technology doing that today. And then, but also anywhere that there was a handoff somewhere else, we were trying to find ways to automate those processes. And here's why. We had squeezed the cost of goods term. There was, I could marginally get improvement out of my cost of goods, better inventory controls, better procurement, better turns on inventory, all those kind of things. So when I looked at a P&L, I had top line revenue, and I wanted that to be cleaner revenue, right? I didn't want to write off so much. So I didn't mind if my top line actually dropped a little bit, as long as my net revenue went up, right? So that was number one. So I literally worked down the sheet. Okay. The first place was cost of goods after cleaning it up. The second place was labor. What are our people doing that is producing profitability and care for our customers? And so we went, and obviously automation and realignment, deploying our resources appropriately. And the only place that's left in this marketplace is efficiency. If you want to grow that top line net revenue number and not grow the other two proportions, particularly the labor, you're going to have to be more efficient. And so that's the opportunity for H&Es today, is to squeeze margin. But also when you squeeze margin, you can't sacrifice scale. So now, is it clean? Is this something that I can now run with faster and more? It's more defensible. It's more dependable. All those different reasons. If you build it the right way, and that's what technology allows us to do today. And that it's always taken human capital, but more than that, it needed smart human capital to grow. Every one of us had that billing manager that knew it all, and everyone fed through that
Tribal
brain
knowledge
on a daily basis, right? Tribal knowledge. And that's what's been holding back companies in our industry for forever. Now you have the ability to convert every element that goes into play as a data element, which now creates a data event that you can now move smartly through the system, right? And decisions can be made smarter. You can create frameworks for all that. So we're really about helping an organization from the front to the back, not just the very front. I think, Alex, you were kind of leaning towards that earlier, because that is the problem. Because bad business, the only thing worse than bad business is the volume of bad business. Once you clean that up, you can automate, accelerate it through the protocol now, and now you've got a much more defensible P&L on the backside.
Yeah, Dewey, if you were to kind of take a step back and look at what Valere has done, what's one workflow that you've seen that sort of transformed, or something that really stood out?
I want to answer this fairly for the audience and not so much just for Valere, but let me merge a couple of things here. When you talk about interoperability, you're really talking about solving one problem that goes across multiple tech stacks, right? It's not just that one-on-one problem. When you're dealing with an API to an API connection, you solve for that problem. And if something breaks on one side, it more than likely breaks it on the other side. In our environment, when a problem breaks over here, it's not going to break the other workflows. everything else is still going to perpetuate. Okay. So that's an important element to this answer, in my opinion. But what doesn't happen in what I'm seeing is that there's a lot of automations for specific tasks. There's AI that's obviously coming into play. We've got, agentic and traditional AI that's coming into play and evolving. So, it's too early really to play that out. But what we're solving and what we're seeing, people come to us and say, I have X problems. Here's where my problem is. And it's really not that simple, because it originated or it's got downstream implications, right? So what we're seeing, to answer your question, is that it's not a singular problem that needs to be addressed. It's usually multiple endpoints that are engaged in solving a specific problem. I hope that helps.
Yeah, no, there's, with a lot of this stuff, there's the front end issue, and there's so many downstream impacts that get course corrected if you improve the front end. So, definitely agree with you. And I was curious, do you have these conversations every day? I know my answer to this, but do you think, generally speaking, DME is behind other industries when it comes to adopting this type of technology?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I this is my answer to that. And quite honestly, at the core, what Valere is trying to do, when our team sat down and said, we were creating our BHAG, who do we want to be? What are we really solving for here? It's about creating an atmosphere. And when I mean atmosphere, I mean true atmosphere where technology can grow in our space. Think about how fragmented every piece of our puzzle are. It's not a simple equation. It's hard for things to blossom in our environment. And I think that is largely due to the soil that we're all on. I mean, it's literally like trying to grow an azalea in Scottsdale. Yeah. I mean, it's difficult. So if you create the right base layer, then other technologies can plug in, and then this can begin to accelerate and catch up. That's what's not available. I mean, there's been plenty of production on the acute side. There's plenty of production outside of healthcare, but in the post-acute care, it's not just HME, guys. It's in the complete long, extended care, post-acute care arena. It's just everyone's left to themselves. And, obviously we have our nationals, we have our really good regionals, but it's still servicing the patients is still a whole bunch of smaller entities that don't have the resources to build the infrastructure to go solve these bigger problems. And so we want to be available for all parties, nationals, regionals, and the smaller ones. So that's what I mean by atmosphere. I don't think the conditions have been right for it to actually propagate across our industry. And I think that is changing, and we want to be a key piece of that.
Absolutely. I think the title of this might be Growing Azaleas in Arizona. That's good.
I like it.
Do you feel like we're close to a tipping point where, automation becomes a necessity versus a nice to have? Because we've been slow to adopt, but we're getting closer where you almost don't have a choice. So curious from your lens if you think we're close to the tipping point, or we have a bit to go still.
Well, MedTrade this year says that we're close. I mean, look at the number coming. I mean, how many different folks are in, and some are doing it better than others. Some of them have industry knowledge. I think it's accelerating. I still think we got a ways to go, honestly, because we're learning. We're learning what works, what doesn't work. And a lot of the automation companies or other AI companies are just throwing their name into the hat. And quite honestly, they're figuring it out as they go. It's not like it's figured out and now they're just grasping people up and things are running like wildfire. So I think if you ask me that question in a year, I think I'll tell you something different. But
sure,
there was a huge step forward from last year to this year. And there's going to be another step forward next year. But it's really this marriage of content, to the technology, the knowledge, the content that needs to build the right technology in the right places, with some consideration that it has to be flexible. I think still what we're seeing is a lot of rigidity to what's in the marketplace. It solves this problem. Well, the next person needs a little bit of modification to that, so forth and so on. And so building those tools, having some of this agentic and new technologies coming are going to help accelerate and bridge that gap. And I think we're going to see that start being introduced in the next year. We're starting to explore ourselves internally where the speed to change inside of this technology is going to separate itself. I don't think in 3 years, there's not going to be a company not utilizing multiple merging automations.
Yeah, I was actually just going to ask if you were to look ahead 3 to 5, maybe even 10 years, what does like a modern DME operation look like to you?
I think it's going to be a hell of a lot simpler, quite honestly. I think that the chaos in our industry comes from too many experiences. And what is happening here is a standardization of the process. There's going to be standards. It's going to be hard to do that business, I believe. And you're going to be able to scale much quicker. So, I've thought about this. And if I had Valere, if I had Nico 10 years ago doing what we're doing today, I'm not sure I would have ever sold, quite honestly. It's the headaches and the pounding and the change, all those different things that are going to help us. I think the thing that I want to see avoided as much as possible is I do think consolidation is good to a certain degree. But what I'm nervous about 3 to 5 years are still these, I'll just call them selfish entities. I mean, they're just trying to be capitalistic and go grab whatever business they can, but they're creating these extremely narrow networks under stringent rules. And the patient is the one that is being penalized. You're not going to get the highest quality product. You're not going to get the highest quality service. It's going to be a race to the bottom. So my hope is that Valere is able to contribute over the next 3 to 5 years to a proven value-based care model where we're connected to all these endpoints. We can bring in all the data more than just paying less for a widget. What is the complete value that's being delivered? And by the way, guys, Valere, its root is value. That's why we're here. Ultimately, that is our long-term goal, is the ability to be able to deliver for every HME and demonstrate value-based care.
Totally. I was just sitting here thinking at the end of the day, what do you think will still require human touch no matter what happens?
Well, I'm going to say the obvious one, care. There's a human element that it can never go away in healthcare. So we're seeing AI agents FaceTime with patients, right? I'm not saying that technology isn't going to still do it, but at some point, a one-on-one, side-by-side relationship with the patient is still going to be there. And so, that's in the care continuum. Okay. I just, whether it's a walker being delivered at a hospital bedside or whether it's, a diabetic monitor being shipped to a patient's home, I hope there continues to be some type of human interaction in the care itself. Obviously, the more clinical, the more hands-on we're going to be with the patient, no doubt about it. But where that is not required, technology is going to continue to drive that low-touch experience. But in one of my presentations I did at MedTrade, I talked about what is AI, what is automation, So y'all are a system of record, right? You have the record and all that. There's still a human resource, and that is a resource of accountability. So just because you have automation, just because you have AI and all this great technology behind you, we just need to shift people from busy work to meaningful movement work. Okay. Whether that is overseeing exceptions to what's going on in the operation, helping the company make decisions, interpreting data, all those different elements. I think we're still going to see humans involved.
I got one last question for you, Dewey, and we can wrap up to our rapid fire round. If a DME owner is listening and feels kind of stuck on like the day-to-day chaos, what would you say would be kind of like the first step that they should actually take to start scaling their business?
I'm just going to go back to our CAS philosophy. That stands for clean, accelerate, scale, transform. And I don't think you can step out of order. And so again, it's about where are things, not as clean as you want them, not as compliant as you want them, not as complete as you need them done. And again, that doesn't have, maybe it's in your purchasing processes. Maybe it's in your intake processes. Maybe it's in your delivery processes, whatever those different, and it's going to be different for everyone, but where things, I would clean things up first. I know that's a generic answer.
No, it's good. It's solid. You got a
It
framework.
really is
Right?
that
That makes
simple, and it's
sense.
not
Yeah.
the same for everyone.
Yeah.
Cool, Dewey. So now we move on to our final segment of the show where we do the rapid fire. So rapid fire is kind of like a this or that sort of fun segment when you're ready.
I hope I'm ready. Let's do it.
All right, let's let it rip.
No brain busters, hopefully.
Yeah, I may lock up here in a second.
Okay. If your phone battery hits 1%, what app are you saving?
Messages.
What's your go-to fast food order?
Dave's Double at Wendy's.
If you had to give up one thing, coffee or your phone, which one would it be?
Coffee.
If you had a free flight tomorrow, where are you going?
Scottsdale.
Let's go.
I'm going to Ireland.
Nice.
Ireland? Nice. Last one. If you weren't in healthcare, what would you be doing?
I never planned on anything else. I always wanted to be a college basketball coach.
Cool.
That's a good one. Well, yeah, now that March Madness is on, that's probably pretty
Well,
inspiring.
Yeah, I actually thought that's
UConn
what I was
game's
going to
crazy.
do first, and then I got real with myself. So
There you go. Well, Dewey, thanks so much for joining us today. This has been a really fun podcast episode. Appreciate you joining. If anyone wants to get in contact with you or your company, what's the best way for them to do that?
Valer-health.com. Don't forget the dash. I'm at Dewey.Roos@Valere-health.com.
Awesome.
Awesome, Dewey.
Perfect.
Well, appreciate you. Thanks again for the time.
Yeah. Thank you guys.